So at the end of 2 full years, Pharaoh dreamed. In verse 8, it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled. And he sent and called for all the magicians of Egypt. This was a big deal here. He knew this was from one of the gods. He didn't know which one. And Pharaoh told them his dream, but there was none that could interpret them unto Pharaoh. Then spake the chief butler unto Pharaoh, saying, Oh, now look at this guy. He sees an opportunity to do Pharaoh a favor instead of Joseph, and he jumps on it. Pharaoh might think more of him if he could help out now. It's for self, not for Joseph. But Joseph had to learn not even to consider that. Because God uses whatever spirit people already have to do His work. And the fact that the butler might not have spoken to Joseph, and might not have spoken to Pharaoh for Joseph because he didn't want to risk getting in any trouble, or just out of meanness, or if he just forgot. Whatever the reason was, is irrelevant. God used whatever it was to do His will. Anyway, the butler finally remembers and said, Oh, I remember my faults this day. Pharaoh, you remember when you were angry with your servants and put me in ward in the captain of the guard's house, me and the chief baker? And we dreamed a dream in one night, I and he. We dreamed each man according to the interpretation of his dream. And there was with us a young man, an Hebrew, servant of the captain of the guard. And we told him, and he interpreted to us our dreams, to each man. According to his dream he did interpret. And it came to pass, as he interpreted to us, so it was. Me he restored unto my office, him he hanged. And Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon. And he shaved himself, and changed his clothes, and came into Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said and he bowed down when he got in there. Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and there is none that can interpret it. And I have heard say of thee that thou canst understand a dream to interpret it. And Joseph answered Pharaoh and said, No, it's not in me. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. He didn't know which God, but he knew it was the God that Joseph trusted, whichever one that was. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, In my dream, behold, I stood upon the bank of the river. What's the river in Egypt? Whenever you're living in this country and you say the river, it's the Nile River. Everywhere else, the Euphrates. It's the river that Pharaoh worships, because they worship the river. It was a god to them. Their life, they thought, depended on it. So Pharaoh was by the river. And behold, there came up out of the river 7 cows. That's what kine means. Fat-fleshed and well-favored, and they fed in a meadow. And behold, 7 other kine came up after them, poor and very ill-favored and lean-fleshed, such as I never saw in all the land of Egypt, for badness. Skin and bones cows came up after the fat ones. And the lean and ill-favored cows did eat up the first 7 fat cows. But when they had eaten them, you couldn't tell it. They were just as skinny as before. Now, you figure if a skinny cow eats a big fat cow, the skinny cow is going to be big and fat. But they weren't. They were still skinny. And then after that, I saw another dream. I saw in my dream 7 ears came up on one stalk. They were full, good ears of corn. And behold, 7 ears withered, thin and blasted with the east wind. By the way, the east wind is a desert wind. So all the way through the Scriptures, when you're talking about the east wind, you're talking about a hot, dry wind. So Pharaoh's talking about 7 ears blasted with the east wind, desert wind, sprung up after them. And the thin ears ate up the 7 good ears, but they stayed skinny. And I told this unto the magicians, but there was none that could declare it to me. But Joseph said unto Pharaoh, and you know, everybody in Pharaoh's court was leaning over. You know, like when E.F. Hutton speaks. Everybody in Pharaoh's court's just holding their breath here now to see if this prisoner can do anything. And Joseph doesn't even hesitate. While Pharaoh is telling him the dream, God's angel is telling him what it means. He's understanding it as Pharaoh tells it. So when Pharaoh finishes, Joseph doesn't have to go off and pray somewhere, the way Daniel did with one of Nebuchadnezzar's dreams. The dream of Pharaoh is one. I know you saw two different things coming up out of the river, but it's all one message. God hath showed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good kine are 7 years, and the 7 good ears are 7 years. The dream is one. And the 7 thin and ill-favored kine that came up after them are 7 years. And the 7 empty ears blasted with the east wind shall be 7 years of famine. This is the thing which I have spoken unto Pharaoh, and what God is about to do, he showeth unto Pharaoh, so that you can prepare. Behold, there are coming 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt. And there shall arise after them 7 years of famine, and all the plenty shall be forgotten in the land of Egypt. You won't even know you ever had 7 good years. Just like you couldn't even tell the 7 skinny cows ate the 7 fat ones. You wouldn't even know the fat ones ever existed. And the plenty shall not be known in the land by reason of the famine following, for it shall be very grievous. And because the dream was doubled unto Pharaoh twice, it is because the thing is established by God. And God will shortly bring it to pass. Now Joseph had been trained by God as a manager, an organizer, a supervisor. Probably Jacob at home in a minor scale, but Potiphar on a major scale. And in prison, God added some other skills to him in the management in difficult circumstances that prepared him for what Pharaoh would have him do next. He didn't take somebody who was ignorant about accounting and make him ruler over Egypt. He didn't take somebody that was ignorant about how to deal with people, supervising people, and make him second in command. He took an experienced man who had learned how to make do in great circumstances, years of plenty, and in bad circumstances, the years in prison. Joseph was perfectly prepared for what God had him to do. What a perfect scheme.
What age do you think Joseph was at this point? Because he was 17 years. So
he was 30 when he stood before Pharaoh. So that's 13 years now in slavery. And if you could ask him, he would say it was all worth it. Now Joseph, as a man of experience, is a little bold here. Joseph knows what ought to be done. He's a manager. He knows how to do what needs to be done, even though it's the biggest job, far bigger job than anything he's ever had. But he knows what Pharaoh ought to do in order to cause Egypt to survive. So he takes it on himself to offer this man that a lot of people worshipped as a god some advice. He said, "Now therefore let Pharaoh search for, look out a man discreet and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land, and take up 20%, a fifth part of all the produce of the land of Egypt in the 7 plenteous years." You're going to have it all left over anyway. If you don't take it up and collect it and take care of it, it's going to be wasted. We're going to have so much. That's why God's giving it, so that we can prepare for the years ahead. You're going to have an abundance now. Let's be smart and store it up. And let them gather all the food of those good years that come, and lay up corn under the hand of Pharaoh, and let them keep food in the cities, and that food shall be for store to the land against the 7 years of famine, which shall be in the land of Egypt, that the land perish not through famine. And Pharaoh and all his counselors knew that was what they had to do. It was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of all his servants. Whether they took some counsel together and talked about it or not, I don't know. But Pharaoh said to his servants, "Can we find such an one as this? A man in whom the Spirit of God is?" And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, now isn't that something? Pharaoh recognized what real wisdom was. Yeah. Real wisdom is hearing from God, because He's the only wise one. And he recognized this man was in touch with God. He didn't realize there was just one, but he realized this one was in touch with him, with a powerful one that was wiser than the magicians, enchanters. They couldn't solve the riddle.
Well, the God that gave Pharaoh the dream also was working. The God gave Joseph the interpretation.
He felt the hookup, didn't he? Pharaoh said unto Joseph, "Forasmuch as God has showed all this to you, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art." God has made you wiser than the others. "Thou shalt be over my house." Wow. You think Joseph is beginning to realize why he's been through what he's been through? He could never have dreamed this unless God gave him a dream like it. But he never did dream it. All he was wanting to do was get out of prison. "Thou shalt be over my house, and according to thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than you." And now that's not even holding back his wives, but he did. I mean, everybody except me is going to live or die by your word. That's some authority. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, "See, I have set thee over all the land of Egypt." And Pharaoh took off his ring from his hand and put it upon Joseph's hand, and arrayed him in vestures of fine linen, and put a gold chain about his neck. And he made him to ride in the second chariot which he had, and they cried before him as Joseph passed through the cities in the chariot. He had runners running in front of him, saying, "Bow the knee," yelling down the streets. Joseph, Zaphnath-Paaneah is coming, bow the knee. And everybody on the streets would bow down, and Joseph would ride through. Now that's really something. And he made him ruler over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, "I am Pharaoh, and without you shall no man lift up his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt." And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zaphnath-Paaneah. And nobody knows what that word means. In your margins you'll have guess of interpreter of dreams, man of food and famine, and all that. The meaning is lost. But whatever it was a good name. It meant something good about Joseph, or God, or both. And he gave Joseph to wife Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. And Joseph went out over all the land of Egypt to begin his organization. And Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went throughout all the land of Egypt. And in the 7 plenteous years the earth brought forth by the handfuls. And Joseph gathered corn as the sand of the sea, very much, until he just quit counting. When an accountant runs out of numbers, it's way up there. For it was without number. And unto Joseph were born 2 sons before the years of famine came, which Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, the priest of On, bare unto him. Joseph called the firstborn Manasseh, or forgetting. "For God," said he, "has made me to forget all my toil." He was so happy he had forgotten how bad it was. Praise God. I've heard testimonies like that before from some of you. Can't even remember how bad something was in the past, but how good it is now. God will make you forget. Glory to God. He will make you forget by loading you down with so many blessings you have to keep up with them. Amen. "Forget all my toil and all my father's house." And the name of the second he called Ephraim, that is fruitful, for God has caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. And the 7 years of plenteousness that was in the land of Egypt were ended, and the 7 years of dearth began to come, according as Joseph had said. And the dearth was in all lands, but in all the land of Egypt there was bread. And when all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said unto all the Egyptians, Go to Joseph. What he saith to you, do it. And anybody cries to God now, that's the response they're going to get. You go to Jesus. Whatever he says, do it. And the famine was over all the face of the earth, and Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold unto the Egyptians, and the famine waxed sore in the land of Egypt. And all countries came into Egypt to Joseph for to buy corn, because that the famine was so sore in all lands. Money was pouring into Egypt. Now when Jacob saw that there was corn in Egypt, he didn't see it, he heard it. Jacob's still over here around Hebron, Beersheba area. And he hears rumors of travelers passing through, going to Egypt and coming back with food from Egypt, that Egypt is loaded. Jacob said to his sons, Why do you sit around looking at each other instead of staring at these dead crops or the barren ground that won't bear any fruit? Behold, I have heard that there is corn in Egypt. Get you down thither and buy for us from thence, that we may live and not die. And Joseph's 10 brethren went down to buy corn in Egypt. But Benjamin, Joseph's brother, Jacob sent not with his brethren, for he said, Lest peradventure mischief befall him. This is Rachel's only surviving son. And the sons of Israel came to buy corn among those who came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. And Pharaoh had said, Go to Joseph, and that's where everybody had to go who wanted food. And Joseph was the governor over the land, and he it was that sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brethren came down and did what?
Bowed right on down.
Amen. Just as the dream that God gave Joseph. Bow themselves before him with their faces to the earth. And Joseph saw his brethren. But you know how an Egyptian official looked, don't you? With all that makeup and all that paint, plus he's 13 years older. Egyptian hairdo, all decked out. Joseph saw his brethren, and he knew them. But he made himself strange unto them, and spoke roughly unto them. And he said unto them, Oya, oya. And the interpreter over in the corner said, he wants to know where you're from. This is Zaphnath Paeania here. You're not just dealing with anybody. And they said, we're from the land of Canaan. We've come to buy food, see, like everybody else. And Joseph knew his brethren, but they knew not him. And Joseph sat there. Can you imagine what kind of thoughts he was having? My Lord and my God. Whew. Joseph is putting the pieces together here now. But I taught this for years without realizing the key ingredient to it, which was the love of God. You can't understand what Joseph is thinking and planning. I couldn't understand it. I didn't know what his plan was. I saw on Christian television, even the cartoons that they have about Joseph, how that Joseph was going to test his brothers to see if they were worthy for him to help. That is so far from the kind of spirit Joseph has. He's not testing anybody. He leaves that up to God who tested him. What Joseph is thinking is that he loves these brothers so much he would die for them. But he knows that if he tells them who he is, he'll never see them again. He knows that they don't know that God did it. They think they did it. And if he reveals his identity, even if he sends them so much food and even if he gives them money, he knows they're not coming back. So the only person in the whole world that he knows 100% was not involved in what happened to him being sold is his little brother. And his gears start cranking. How can he, number one, get Benjamin back in Egypt? Joseph can't move to Canaan. Number two, do it in such a way to where these 10 men feel free to go back and forth. Otherwise, his daddy, if he's still living, and their families will starve. How can he be that kind to them so that they have confidence enough to come back and yet get Benjamin there with them? He doesn't want to embarrass them. He's happy that they think he's dead or they think he's gone, never to come back. He wants them to keep thinking that and yet have enough confidence in Zaphnath-Paaneah to where they're not afraid to come back. And he has to go through a little bit of a process here to come up with a plan. Takes him a little bit of time. And Joseph remembered the dreams which he dreamed. And he's still speaking Egyptian now. He speaks to the interpreter speaks to them. And the interpreter said to them, "You are spies, to see the nakedness of the land ye are come." And all the other people there buying food are listening, and all the servants of Zaphnath-Paaneah, everybody's starting to turn their head now to look at these 10 guys from a foreign land. And they said, No, my Lord. But to buy food are thy servants come. We're all one man's sons. We're all brothers. We're true, honest men. Your servants are no spies. And the interpreter tells Zaphnath-Paaneah in Egyptian. Zaphnath-Paaneah speaks back, and the interpreter says, "No, but to see the nakedness of the land you are come." And they said, "No, thy servants are 12 brothers. We have 12 sons in our family, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. Behold, the younger one, he's still with our father, and the other one's dead." That's Hebrew idiom. To say a child is not is to say he's dead. All the way through the Old Testament, you'll see the children were not or something. It just means dead. Well, Joseph knows that they know better than that. And the interpreter told Zaphnath-Paaneah. Zaphnath-Paaneah spoke back, "This is it that I spake unto you, saying you are spies." And his tone of voice makes everybody's ears prick, stand up, their eyes open. And then he says, "Hereby shall you be proved. By the life of Pharaoh ye shall not go forth from here unless your youngest brother comes here." This is just his preliminary plan. He fine-tunes it over the next 24 hours. "Send one of you, and let him fetch your brother, and ye shall be kept in prison, that your words may be proved, whether there be any truth in you, or else by the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies." And he put them all together into ward 3 days. During that 3 days, he wasn't comfortable with that. Just one person wouldn't be able to carry enough food for all the people still needing it. After 3 days, Zaphnath-Paaneah's guard came, opened the prison door, and said, "The great Zaphnath-Paaneah will speak with you." And on the 3rd day, they came into his presence and bowed down again. And his interpreter told them, "This is what the great Zaphnath-Paaneah has determined. This do and live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brethren be bound in the house of your prison, and the rest of you go carry corn for the famine of your houses." Instead of letting one go and 9 be in prison, Joseph has determined that 9 should go and 1 stay behind. "But bring your youngest brother unto me, so shall your words be verified, and you shall not die." And that's what they had to do. They were still standing in front of Zaphnath-Paaneah when they started talking among themselves in Hebrew, thinking nobody in that room could understand them. And they started talking to one another and saying, "Man, we are verily guilty concerning our brother. We saw the anguish of his soul, that he begged us and besought us, and we would not listen. Now God's done this to us. This distress has come upon us. And Reuben spoke up and said, "Didn't I tell you, don't sin against the child? You wouldn't listen. Therefore, behold, God is requiring his blood." So Joseph knows now that Reuben really intended to rescue him. He didn't know that before. And they knew not that Joseph understood them, for he spoke to them by an interpreter. And when he saw that how they were still remembering him and knew they had done wrong, he walked out. When he walked out, everybody bows down till he gets gone. He turned and wept, and turned about from them and wept. He had to go off and cry. He didn't want them suffering like this. He didn't want them ignorant, blaming themselves. And he returned to them again and communed with them and took from them Simeon. He chose Simeon. He probably would have chosen Reuben except for that last sentence. Reuben was the firstborn son. Simeon was second in line. So the honor of being in prison until they got back fell on Simeon. And no doubt Zaphnath-Paaneah took good care of him. And he bound him in front of their faces, before their eyes. And then Zaphnath-Paaneah commanded his servants in secret to fill their sacks with corn and to put everybody's money back in his sack. He wanted to make sure they had money to come back and buy some more food. He knew they were dishonest enough to where if they went back and found their money in their sacks, they had it in them to come back and pretend it was different money. He just wanted them to have it. Whether they were honest or dishonest was irrelevant. He wanted them to have food. Give them provision, give them extra food to take care of them on the way. And thus did he unto them. So his servants laded their asses with the corn, and they departed thence with the corn they had. And then they got on the road. And as one of them opened his sack to give his ass some food at a hotel or an inn they stayed in, he found his money. Just one of them now. The rest don't know their money's in there too. One of them opened his sack. It was in his sack's mouth. And he said to his brethren, "My money is back. It's here. It's in my sack." And their heart failed them, and they were afraid, saying one to another, "What is this that God has done to us?" We go back down there, and they find that you didn't pay yours. He might think all of us didn't pay. He might think we all hid our money in our sacks. Now that would be bad. And they came to Jacob, their father, into the land of Canaan, and told him all that befell them, saying, "The man who is Lord over the land spoke roughly to us, and took us for spies of the country. And we said to him, We are honest men, we're no spies. We be 12 brethren, sons of our father. One is dead, the youngest is back with our father in the land of Canaan. And the man, the Lord of the country, said to us, Hereby shall I know that ye are true men. Leave one of your brethren here with me, and take food for the famine of your houses, and be gone. And bring your youngest brother unto me. Then shall I know you are no spies, but that ye are true men. So will I deliver you your brother, and you shall have the privilege of trafficking in the land. You can come by and sell all you want to." And it came to pass, that then they all emptied their sacks. That behold, every man's bundle of money was in his sack. And when both they and their father saw the bundles of money, they were afraid. And Jacob their father said unto them, "I send you to do one simple thing. Go to the grocery store. And now look. Me ye have bereaved of my children. Joseph is dead. Simeon is gone. He's not here anymore. And you want to take Benjamin away? All these things are against me." And Reuben spoke up. He spoke to his father, saying, "Slay my 2 sons if I bring him not to thee again. Deliver him into my hand. I will bring him to thee again." But he didn't trust Reuben. Reuben was a wishy-washy kind of character. You're unstable. He tells him that right before he dies. He took the course of least resistance, and Reuben's noble promises of bringing him back, or you could kill his 2 sons, really didn't carry much weight with him, because Reuben didn't carry much weight with him. Later, when Judah does that, he has to take him up on it. And Jacob said, "My son Benjamin shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he's left alone. If mischief befall him by the way in which ye go, in the which you go, then shall ye bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to the grave. So Joseph has to wait. We don't know how long, but it's a pretty good while his brothers and their families and his father get back to the desperation level again. And the famine was sore in the land. And it came to pass, when they had eaten up the corn which they had brought out of Egypt, their father said unto them, Go again and buy us a little food. And Judah spake unto him, saying, The man did solemnly protest unto us, saying, You shall not see my face, except your brother be with you. And he's the only one that can release the food. If you will send our brother with us, we will go down and buy thee food. But if you will not send him, we will not go down. For the man said unto us, You shall not see my face, except your brother be with you. And Israel said, Why'd you even tell him you had a brother? And he said, How'd we know what he was going to do? We were trying to convince him that we were all brothers. Tell him Look at this. This is so heartbreaking here. Verse 7. The man asked us very straightly. He asked us minute details. We knew he was trying to find out whether we were telling the truth or not. Joseph knew they were telling the truth. He wanted to find out how Daddy was doing, how this one was doing that he used to play with, how that. And instead of saying that, he said, If you have a father, is he alive? And he'd go on, ask question after question. Inside, Joseph was just bleeding as he found out the details, who had died, who was still alive, what had happened to this one, what had happened to that one. Phew. And they tell his father about that. He asked us straightly of our state and of our kindred, saying, Is your father yet alive? Have you another brother? And we told him we answered him the truth. Could we have known that he would say, Bring him down to Egypt? We didn't. How could we have known that? And Judah said to Israel, his father, Send the lad with me, and we will arise and go, that we may live and not die, both we and you, and also our children. I will be surety for him. Of my hand shalt thou require him, if I bring him not unto thee, and set him before thee, then let me bear the blame forever. For if we hadn't lingered, we would have been back by now. And Israel has to cave in. It's either hold on to Benjamin and starve with him, or take the chance of sending him. And his father said, If it must be so now, do this. Take him a present. Take the best fruits in the land in your vessels. Carry down the man a present, a little balm and a little honey, spices and myrrh and nuts and almonds, and take twice as much money in your hand. And the money that was brought again in the mouth of your sacks, carry it back down there. Maybe it was just an oversight. And then he has to break down and say, Take your brother too. Go again to the man. And God Almighty give you mercy before the man, that he may send away your other brother. And Benjamin, if I be bereaved of my children, I am bereaved. Boy, what a sad time for him. Watch Benjamin ride off with those to that man down in Egypt who thinks he knows something about him when he really doesn't know anything. And the men took the present. They took double money in their hand, and Benjamin, and rose up and went down to Egypt and stood before Joseph, or the Zaphnath-Paaneah. And Joseph saw Benjamin with them. He said to the ruler of his house, Pick out these men out. They were in a crowd, people buying food. Bring these men to my home, and slay for them to eat. Make ready, and these men shall dine with me at noon. Now, what do you think they thought when Zaphnath-Paaneah's servant said, You come this way? We're not spies. We're not spies. And the man brought the men to Zaphnath-Paaneah's house. And the men were afraid because they were brought to Joseph's house, and they said, It's because of the money that was in our sacks at the times we brought it. We know what he's after. He's looking for a reason against us to fall on us and take us for slaves and our asses. And they came near to the steward of Joseph's house. Joseph was the steward of Potiphar's house, overseeing everything. Now Joseph has a steward. And they came to the steward of Joseph's house and communed with him at the door, and they said, "Sir, look, we came indeed at the first time to buy corn. That's what we came for. That's all. We just want some food." And it came to pass, when we were on our way back at the end, we opened our sacks. Well, they kind of summarized it. Just one of them opened their sack at the end, but they, let's just say it this way. We came to the end, we opened our sacks, and every man's money was in the mouth of his sack. Our money in full weight, every penny of it. And we brought it back again in our hand. And we brought other money we brought other money to buy food. We don't know how the money got in our sacks. And the steward said, relax, don't be afraid. Your God, maybe the God of your father, has given you treasure in your sacks. I had your money, so I have the record of it right here. And then he brought Simeon out of prison. Simeon came and said, "Boy, what took y'all so long?" And Judah said, "Daddy wouldn't let Benjamin go." And the man brought the men into Joseph's house, and they gave them water, and they washed their feet, and he gave their asses food. Boy, they were really being given the royal treatment here as guests of the great ruler of Egypt. And they got their present together that Jacob had sent to this man before Joseph came at noon, for they heard that they should eat bread there. And when the royal attendants started coming in the door at noontime, they knew Zaphnath-Paaneah would walk in any minute. And when Joseph came home, they brought him the present which was in their hand into the house, and bowed themselves to the earth. And through an interpreter he asked again of their welfare. "Is your father well, the old man of whom you spoke? Is he still alive?" And they answered, "Thy servant, our father, is in good health. He's still living. Yes, sir. Yes, sir." And they bowed down their heads and made they couldn't do it enough. And he lifted up his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin, first time in 13 years, his mother's son. And he said, "Is this your younger brother of whom you spake unto me?" And they told the interpreter, "Yes." And in his own tongue he spoke to Benjamin and said, "God be gracious unto thee, my son." And then he turned around and walked out. This is a strange situation for these shepherds to be in, herdsmen. Joseph he couldn't take it. For his bowels did yearn for his brother, and he sought where to weep. He entered into his chamber, and just wept a little while. He did not want to make his brothers afraid. He wanted them to live and their families. And he washed his face and went out and refrained himself and commanded, "Oi!" And the shepherds started looking around, and then they saw him bringing food in and said, he must have said, "Set on food." And they set on for him by himself, and for them by themselves, for the Egyptians, and for the Egyptians which did eat with him by themselves, because the Egyptians might not eat bread with the Hebrews. That's an abomination to Egyptians. And they set before him the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth. And the men marveled one at another. Good grief. This is good. And he took them. Well, they were set down from the youngest to the oldest. I wonder if part of the reason they were marveling is that this Zaphnath-Paaneah knew who was youngest and who was oldest. How to sit them. Boy, he was a great man. And Reuben's telling the rest of them, "Watch what you think, fellas. Watch what you think." And he took them and sent messes of food unto them from before him. But Benjamin's mess was 5 times as much as any of theirs. And they drank and were merry with him. And meanwhile, while they were relaxing, they thought everything was fine. He's talking to his steward, an Egyptian. Fill every man's sacks with food, as much as they can carry, and put every man's money in his sack's mouth. Again. And put my cup, this one right here, the silver cup, in the sack's mouth of the youngest, and his corn money. And he did according to the word Joseph had spoken. So while they were having a wonderful feast, Joseph was working his plan to get Benjamin with him and let the rest go free, and still feel good about coming back. And as the morning was light, as soon as the morning was light, the men were sent away. So they spent the night there, they and their asses. And when they were gone out of the city, not yet too far off, Joseph said to his steward, Now go, follow after the men, and when thou dost overtake them, say unto them, Why have you rewarded evil for good? Is not this the silver vessel in which my Lord drinketh, and whereby he indeed divineth? You have done evil in so doing. So here they go, taking off after them, and Joseph's 10 brothers are going down the road back from Egypt, back toward Canaan's land, feeling mighty relieved and happy and wonderful that he knows they're not spies, and they see a dust cloud behind them. And then they see it's a big group of tough-looking guys. And then they say, I wonder who they're after. I'm glad it's not us. Whew. And when they got to them, they stopped. And they started talking. And Zaphnath-Paaneah's interpreter, Stewart, said to them, he spoke to them what Joseph said. Why have you returned evil for my master doing you so much good while you were in Egypt? Wasn't he good enough for you? To you? And they said, well, what? Why are you saying that? God forbid that thy servant should do what you said. But look, the money which we found in our sacks' mouths, we brought it again to you out of the land of Canaan. How then should we steal out of thy Lord's house silver or gold? I tell you what, they said. Let me tell you, whoever has that, you let him die, and we'll be your slaves. He said, all right. Tell you what, I'll take you up on some of that. With whom it is found, whoever has that silver cup will be my servant. And the rest of you be blameless, can go on your way. And they said, well, we just hold on here. And they speedily got down, every man his sack to the ground, and opened every man his sack. And he started with Reuben, and Simeon, then Levi's sack, and then Judah's sack. And they said, see there, see there? I don't know what they said about the money still being in there, but they might have not lifted up that lid too high. And it went all the way down to the youngest. Reuben had already started packing his back up, and Simeon, they were ready to go. Let's get this over with. Check Benjamin's bag and let's go. And he reaches down in there, the servant does, and he reaches down and he lifts up a silver cup. I feel like they felt. You couldn't say anything. They just tore their clothes and laid at every man his ass, and they went back. They were not going home without Benjamin. And Judah and his brethren came to Joseph's house. He was there waiting. Boy, this guy knew we were coming back. And they fell before him on the ground. And Zaphnath-Paaneah said, What deed is this that ye have done? Didn't you know that a man like I can certainly see things? I can divine. Now Judah's the one responsible for Benjamin, so he's the one most desperate at this point. Judah said, what can we say? In their minds, they're probably thinking these sons of Rachel have done nothing but cause us problems since the day they were born. What shall we say unto my Lord? What shall we speak? Or how shall we clear ourselves? I mean, we don't have any defense. God has found out the iniquity of our servants. Behold, we are my Lord's slaves. We, and he also with whom the cup is found. They'd rather stay there and be slaves to this man than face daddy without Benjamin. They don't want to see what's going to happen to him. Zaphnath-Paaneah saith, God forbid that I should do so, but the man in whose hand the cup is found, he shall be my servant. And as for you, get you up in peace unto your father. I will not punish you for another man's sin. You are free to come back. He implies that too. And Judah said, you don't understand. He, please listen. That's what he just comes near and he begs him. Oh, my Lord, let thy servant, I pray thee, speak a word in my Lord's ears. Let not thine anger burn against thy servant, for thou art even as Pharaoh. He goes like this. You said, and then we said, and then you said, and then we said. He goes through the whole thing. My Lord has asked his servant, saying, have you a father or a brother? We said unto my Lord, we have a father, an old man, a child of his old age, a little one. His brother is dead, and he's alone and is left of his mother, and his father loves him. And you said unto your servants, bring him down that I may see him. And we said to my Lord, he can't leave his father. His father will die of grief. And you said, unless he comes down, you'll never see me again. And so we came back, and I told our father, we told him, and our father said in verse 25, go again and buy food. We said, we can't go back and buy food without Benjamin. And thy servant, verse 27, said to us, you know that my wife bare me 2 sons, and the one went out from me. And I said, surely he's torn in pieces. Animals got him, and I saw him not since. And now, whatever Judah says after that is irrelevant. Because now Joseph knows what his daddy thinks happened to him. He knows he'd had nothing to do with him being sold. He knows it now. Yeah, I doubt Joseph even heard whatever else Judah said. He just stood, he couldn't take it. Now try to imagine this. Here's Judah crying, sweating. All the brothers there was captured. Benjamin absolutely baffled. Terrible thing about to happen to all of them, their family. The worst thing yet in their whole lives. And they're standing there before this man who can read minds, and all of a sudden this man's looking at them, and the interpreter, Judah's pouring out his guts, and the interpreter's pouring them back out into him, and he's living unmoved. And Judah mentions his father, thinking he's torn up by animals, and the man starts getting softer. And all of a sudden, this man hollers out in Egyptian, and all the Egyptian servants take off and run. And there's nobody left but 10 shepherds in that Zaphnath-Paaneah in this great big palace. Were we supposed to run? What do you do? And the great Zaphnath-Paaneah, tears start running out of his eyes. And he breaks down and cries with a loud voice. Just boo-hoos. And the brothers are thinking, man, Judah, you can really tell a story. You are good. But that's not it. And this man comes down to them with tears pouring out of his eyes. And he opens his mouth in Hebrew. And he says, I am Joseph. And their breath left them. It says they could not answer him. They couldn't get any breath to come out of their body. There are only about 4 or 5 places like this in the Bible. This is the first. The other you'll read in 2 Samuel 10, 11 or so, when the prophet looks at David and says, you're the man. What power. You can't even describe the feelings. When the feelings get this strong, your conversation really isn't that logical. All Joseph could say was, is Daddy still living? I mean, he already knows. They already know he knows. He just felt like he wanted to say something. I am Joseph, your brother. does my daddy still live? And his brethren could not answer him. They were troubled at his presence. And Joseph said, come near to me, please. And they took a few steps closer to him. He said, I am Joseph, your brother, that you sold into Egypt. But don't be sorry. Look at that. When you see what's happened to you from God to bring you here, you will look at the people who did it to you and say, please don't be sorry. Please don't be sorry. I needed that to be happy. I needed that to love God. That helped form me into the blessed person that I am. Praise God.
Amen.
Don't be sorry. Don't be sorry. Don't be angry with yourself that you sold me here. God did it for a blessing. None of us are victims. None of us in Christ are victims. None of us need to be pitied. We're more than conquerors in Him. We're going to rule the world. God did send me before you to preserve life. For these 2 years has a famine been in the land. There's still 5 more years of famine coming. There's not even going to be enough rain to put out a bud. God sent me before you to preserve for you, your children, to keep your name alive. He sent me ahead of you to act as your near kinsman and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now it was not you, brothers, that sent me here, but God. And He has made me a father to Pharaoh, and Lord of all his house, and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. Now go back to my father and say to him, thus saith thy son Joseph. Praise God. God has made me Lord of all of Egypt. Come down to me and don't hang around up there anymore. And thou shalt dwell in the land of Goshen. That's the best land of Egypt. You see, Egypt, I've told you this before, the Nile, we haven't added this yet, but the Nile River comes down here. 95% of Egypt is nothing but hot, dry sand. Nothing but what they can with foot pedals used to be before revolution came, industrial revolution. Just water they could dump out of the river to water some fields until it hit this flat land up here, and the river spreads out because it's not just one deep valley. It kind of flattens out, and that's got a lot of green pastures up there in the land of Goshen. That's the good part of Egypt. This is the dry part of Egypt. And He says, you can stay in the land of Goshen. I know you got cattle. Stay in the best part of the land. And thou shalt be near unto me, you and your children and your children's children, your flocks and your herds and all that you have. And there will I nourish thee, for yet there are 5 years of famine, lest thou and thy house and all that thou hast come to poverty. Look, your eyes see, and then he looks at Benjamin, and the eyes of your brother Benjamin, my brother Benjamin, that it is my mouth that speaketh unto you. Go tell my father of all my glory in Egypt, and of all that you have seen, and ye shall haste. Hurry up now, and bring down my father here. And then he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept upon his neck. And he kissed all his brethren, and wept upon them. And after that, they started getting some words out. What would they tell him? He's already told them not to apologize. And he is Zaphnath Paaneah. And the rumor of this was heard in Pharaoh's house, saying, Joseph's brethren are come. And it pleased Joseph well and his servants. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, you tell your brothers to do this. Load up your animals and go, get into the land of Canaan, and bring your father and your households. Come to me. I will give you the good of the land of Egypt, and ye shall eat the fat of the land. Now thou art commanded to this do ye. Take you wagons out of the land of Egypt. Give them big wagons to take, instead of traveling by mules. Take wagons out of the land of Egypt for your little ones, for your wives, and bring your father and come. And don't worry about your stuff. You can leave it here. For the good of all the land of Egypt is yours. Wow. They were blessed because of Joseph. And the children of Israel did so. Joseph gave the wagons according to the commandment of Pharaoh and gave them provision for the way. And to all of them he gave each man changes of clothes. Clothes were very important back then. Poor people didn't have clothes. They covered up what they could with rags they'd find here or there, but having clothes was a luxury, especially good clothes. But to Benjamin he gave 300 pieces of silver and 5 changes of raiment, 5 suits. And to his father he sent after this manner, 10 asses laden with the good things of Egypt, 10 she-asses laden with corn and bread and meat for his father by the way. So he sent his brethren away. Now what are they going to say to Jacob when they get home?
How are we going to break this?
How are we going to break this news to Daddy?
Wow. That's what they're talking about.
So the great Zaphnath-Paaneah is discerning enough to know that they might start trying to, well, you're the first one who said, let's tie him up. Yeah, but you're the one that actually threw him in the pit. Yeah, he knew that the fear of their father might provoke them to turn on each other. So he tells them, and they departed. He said, see that you fall not out by the way. Let's fall out with each other. Don't get into a quarrel and a fight along the way. He probably had to remind them, it wasn't you. But they have a hard time going back to their father and say, Daddy, guess what God did to Joseph? And they went up to Egypt and came into the land of Canaan and to Jacob their father and told him, saying, Joseph is still alive, and he is that man in Egypt that we were so afraid of. Jacob's heart fainted. He didn't believe them. He just couldn't believe them. And they told him all the words of Joseph which he had said to them. And then when he saw the wagons that Pharaoh had sent, they were fine wagons, which Joseph had sent to carry him, the spirit of Jacob their father revived, and Israel said, it is enough. Joseph my son is yet alive. I will go and see him before I die. And Israel took his journey with all that he had and came to Beersheba. On his way from Hebron down to Egypt, went through Beersheba and offered sacrifices unto the God of his father Isaac, and God appeared to him to encourage him. He said in verse 3, I am God, the God of thy father. Fear not to go down into Egypt, for I will there make of thee a great nation. I will go down with you, Jacob, into Egypt. I will surely also again bring thee up again, and Joseph shall put his hand upon thine eyes. That is, when you die, Joseph will reach down and close your eyes. Jacob's going to die with his eyes open, and Joseph is going to close them. So Jacob arose, came on down to Egypt with all that came with him. Verse 28, and he sent Judah before him unto Joseph. Sent Judah ahead when they got close to Egypt to tell Joseph he was close, to direct his face to Goshen, and they came to the land of Goshen. And Joseph made ready his chariot and went up to meet Israel his father to Goshen and presented himself to him. And he fell on his neck and wept on his neck a long time. And Israel said unto Joseph, now let me die, since I have seen your face, because you are still alive. And Joseph said unto his brethren and unto his father's house, I will go up and show Pharaoh, and I'll say to him, my brethren and my father's house, which were in Canaan, are come to me. And the men are shepherds. This is what I'll tell Pharaoh. I'll tell him that you're shepherds, and your trade has been to feed cattle, and you've brought your flocks with you and your herds. And it shall come to pass when Pharaoh shall call you, and he will call you, he'll want to meet you. And he'll ask you, what is your occupation? You tell him that your work is with cattle, and he'll give you the land of Goshen. because he won't make you live close to him. He will want you close to him because of me, but he won't allow that to happen if you're shepherds. He'll send you to Goshen, because every shepherd is an abomination to the Egyptians. It had some kind of religious reason for that. I don't know what it is. They probably worshipped whatever shepherds killed. About when the Roman Empire, well, may have been during the Republican era of Rome, a Roman ambassador was in Egypt riding through the streets, and his chariot, a cat ran out, and his chariot ran over the cat and killed it. Well, Egyptians worshiped cats. And a mob saw a cat run over, and they mobbed the ambassador and killed him. So these Egyptians were very serious about the animals. They worshipped roaches. They had little things drawn and little rings with roaches on it. They were serious about their animals they worshipped. I'm sure this has some kind of religious reason that a shepherd was an abomination to the Egyptians at this time. So Joseph came, told Pharaoh in chapter 47, "My father and my brethren and their flocks and their herds and all that they have are come out of the land of Canaan, and they're in Goshen." And he took some of his brethren, 5 of them, and presented them to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said, "What is your occupation?" And they said, "We're shepherds. And we've come here to sojourn because there's no pasture left in Canaan. And we ask you, please, let us stay in Goshen." And Pharaoh spoke to Joseph, saying, well, he told him to go to Goshen if they needed that. And then verse 7, this is very touching to me. Joseph brought in Jacob, his old father. His father at this time is 130 years old. And he set him before Pharaoh, and look at this. Jacob blessed Pharaoh. And the lesser is blessed by the greater. That is, Pharaoh looked up to Jacob as being the father of Zaphnath-Paaneah and all that he had done. And Jacob gave a blessing to Pharaoh for taking care of his lost son for 13 years. And Pharaoh said unto Jacob, "How old are you?" And Jacob said to Pharaoh, "The days of the years of my pilgrimage are 130 years. Few and evil have the days of the years of my life been. And I have not attained unto the days of the years of the life of my fathers in the days of their pilgrimage." And Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out from before Pharaoh. Now I gave you a sheet about Jacob's life. Few and evil have the days of the years of my life been. Let's look over Jacob's life and see what kind of life he had, and you compare it with the kind of life you've been given. Number 1, Israel, Jacob was not the firstborn, so he started out with 1 strike against him. 2, he was not the robust masculine type. 3, Isaac favored Esau. 4, he was unmarried at an old age. You know, if you use your calculator, and I've done this over and over and over, he was 70 when he had to flee from Esau. I know that sounds weird, but you look at that piece of paper that I gave you to start with and add up the numbers yourself. He was an old man. He was getting old. Number 5, he had to flee for his life from his brother Esau. He worked for Laban 7 years for Rachel, but was given Leah. He worked 7 more years for Rachel. He suffered constant strife and jealousy between Leah and Rachel. He suffered years of tension with Rachel because of her barrenness. He worked altogether 20 years for Laban. That might have been the worst part right there. He fled from Laban and barely escaped. When he fled from Laban, he had no place to go that he knew was safe. Idolatry was in his family. An angel gave him a permanent limp. He limped into Pharaoh's presence. He bought peace with Esau with a large portion of his herd. Dinah, his only daughter, was molested by a Canaanite. Simeon and Levi wickedly deceived and murdered the men of an entire city. His beloved Rachel died, giving birth to Benjamin. There was constant family discord because of his special affection for Joseph. Joseph was apparently killed by a wild animal. I don't even mention in here that Reuben committed incest with one of Jacob's wives. When a terrible famine struck, he had to send his sons to Egypt for food. His sons returned, except for Simeon, who was held hostage by the ruler of Egypt. The ruler of Egypt demanded that Rachel's other son, Benjamin, be brought to Egypt, And he refused until starvation threatened the whole family, and he sadly had to send him away. Now, have you had a life that's rough? Who in here feels like we need to pity you? You've got something to thank God for. Verse 11, Joseph placed his father and brethren and gave them a possession in the land of Egypt, in the best of the land, in the land of Ramesses. That's spelled differently from what I have it on your homework, but it is spelled with 2 A's these days, at least in some places, as Pharaoh had commanded. And Joseph nourished his father and his brethren and all his father's household with bread according to their families. And then we're told this may be a principal way how Pharaoh became a god figure in Egypt. Because as the food gave out, all the people brought all the land, eventually used up all their money to buy food from Zaphnath-Paaneah. When they had no more food, they brought their cattle in verse 17. So Joseph gave them bread, and all the cattle of Egypt, all the livestock in Egypt became Pharaoh's. And verse 18, when that year was ended, they came into him a second time, and they said in verse 19, why should we die right in front of your face? We and our land, buy us and our land. So everybody in Egypt became a slave to Pharaoh. And all the land became his, except what he honored God with by letting the priest have. You do a good thing for God's people, and there's no end to the blessing God will give you. Jesus said if you give one of his disciples a cup of water in his name, you would receive a reward. And Pharaoh had blessed Joseph, and that made Joseph able to bless his family, and now Pharaoh's he becomes the owner of Egypt. It's not a democracy.
Ron, you think that's the result of Jacob blessing Pharaoh?
Well, that's all part of it. Jacob blessed Pharaoh. You know there's got to be a blessing that comes with it. Well, he blessed Esau and he got rich. Cattle, sons, whatever. In verse 26, verse 23, Joseph said unto the people, behold, I have bought you this day and your land for Pharaoh. Lo, here is seed for you, and ye shall sow the land. And it shall come to pass in the increase that you shall give 20% to Pharaoh, 1/5 part. 4 parts shall be your own for seed, for food, for your households, for your children. In verse 25, he said, hey, you've saved our lives. You want 30%? We'd give it. In verse 26, Joseph made it a law over the land of Egypt. How about that? Just Joseph making laws now. Joseph made it a law over all the land of Egypt, and to this day, that Pharaoh should have the 5th part, except the land of the priest only, which became not Pharaoh's.